Getting to work on campuses every day means that I still am in contact with students. So there are still those moments. If you're a former teacher and you are working with teachers or working in classrooms often enough that students recognize you, knowing that when you are changing things up too much for people, for their brains to like keep up with, or
Mhm.
for them to be happy and feel like they are confident rather than always kept off kilter, is going to be the most important.
Joining me today is Crystal Williams, and she is a district literacy coach. So, Crystal, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Let's go ahead and get started. Crystal, can you explain what a literacy coach does?
A district literacy coach is somebody who is employed by a public school district to support campuses in raising the level of literacy according to whatever the district measures or metrics might be.
Okay. And what made you want to get into this career path, and how did you get your start in it?
Well, I got my start when I was teaching elementary school as a fourth grade teacher, and
Okay.
I recognized the signs of burnout. And I love teaching and I love students, but the way the system works is not exactly what
Yeah.
I expected. And I felt in some ways doing more harm than good. So when I left teaching, I thought, is there a way that I can prevent other good teachers from feeling burnt out?
Hmm.
Can I support them? Can I help them realize district goals, but in a way that feels like they matter and that we
Yeah.
care or empathize with what they're going through? So that's how I started my journey. So I've been coaching for 5 years now.
Wow, that's amazing. And what parts of your job are the most exciting or the most interesting to you?
Well, there's several parts that I love. One is that, like I said, I love the students. So being a
Mhm.
literacy coach and getting to work on campuses every day means
Yeah.
that I still am in contact with students. So there are still those moments. If you're a former teacher and you are working with teachers or working in classrooms often enough that students recognize you and
Mhm.
they do the Miss Williams, whatever, when you walk through the door or like
Yeah.
hug you, then that might be something that you really still enjoy or crave. And
Yeah.
then the other piece is that now that I'm working with adults, I'm really working to transform behaviors. And
Okay.
yes, that started with teaching because in some ways you are transforming student behaviors and talking to them and raising them in some aspects with, in conjunction with their parents.
Yeah.
Um, and so now working with adults, it can be that similar feeling of, hey, let's set a goal together. Whatever that goal is, I'm going to help you reach it
Mhm.
in any way that I can. So
Yeah.
that's why I love doing this work. I see people being proud of themselves, and I'm proud of
Yeah.
them too.
Yeah. And now on the flip side, what parts of the job are harder, emotionally challenging, or maybe just not so fun?
Mm, that sometimes with working with people, maybe they don't always want to be coached
Mhm.
because with coaching, you really do need someone's consent. And
Yeah.
I'm not a consultant that's coming in where somebody has said, I really want you here, help me get better. Instead, I'm employed by a public school district and they're like, go to the schools that have the most need.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I go to those schools, there are people might be feeling like, open, help us. What
Mhm.
do we do? And other times they're like, we got it. We've seen your kind
Yeah.
before. You're just a spy. So they might be feel like I'm spy for the
Yeah.
district and may not be as open to building
Okay.
relationships. So that can be
Yeah.
challenging. I feel that resistance.
Yeah. And what do you think that people might underestimate or overestimate about this job?
Hmm. I think that especially when it comes to teachers, they may think that a position that is outside of the classroom is cushy or that you don't
Okay.
have to do any work.
Mm.
Um, and maybe it is for some people, but that has not been my experience.
Okay.
Um, I so hard and I worked hard as a teacher, but there's definitely some perks to being a literacy coach because you don't have to grade. And that was a huge
Okay.
thing. It's like taking home all those papers. You don't have to come up with lesson plans. That was
Mm,
another thing, was like meeting those constant deadlines
yeah.
for making sure you're ready for your students. Um, when you are not going to be there for a day, you don't have to get all these sub plans ready, so there's some underestimating on, oh, it's cushy, but then on the other side, what they might overestimate is like you have to do all this stuff and be like a robot for the district, but not really. Like you
Yeah.
do have some flexibility. You are able to go from campus to campus. You are able to, mm, I guess, design what work you're going to do with your
Okay.
clients, so to speak.
Okay.
So I think that there's both sides to it. I
Both
think if
sides.
you are
Yeah.
somebody who feels that I understand where my district is going, or I really appreciate the curriculum that we're working with, then this might be a good position for you to advocate for that.
Okay. And now going into the job itself, are there specific niches that people can choose to specialize in within the district literacy area?
So, of course, you can be a math coach, a science coach, or what have you. And then within
Okay.
literacy coaching, you have different age groups. You could be a primary,
Okay.
like, or uh, elementary, middle school, high school. So there's some of that there.
Okay.
You can be a bilingual coach and working with, or a multilingual coach and working with different teachers who also are looking to teach their particular content, but you are there coaching them through the lens of language. So you could be
Yeah.
coaching a science coach or a math coach or what have you, but looking through the lens of language. But
Okay.
within um, literacy coaching, yeah, I would say it's mostly that you are looking at those grade bands. And I think that there have been times when um, districts have even said, even though you're an elementary coach, you're going to work with K through 2. You're going to work
Okay.
with 3 through 5, or they shift those
Yeah.
bands that way.
So you're a district literacy coach. Would you say that the district is the only employer for this type of job, or are there other employers for literacy coaches?
I would say that from what I've seen, that there might be several titles for what it is that we're
Okay.
doing.
Okay.
Um, you can be a literacy coach. You can also be a, a reading specialist or an instructional specialist or what have you. Like there may be different ways that this can be titled. And
Okay.
then I'm also looking at positions that are outside of public school or more in the corporate setting. So we
Okay.
may be considered, we're trainers, essentially. We're delivering
Okay.
development sessions. We are working one-on-one with coaching. We are modeling what it looks like to do something. Um, so I think within the corporate setting, it does look like you can sort of transition into a little bit more of instructional design,
Okay.
because we also like write curriculum and
Okay.
assessments. It can look more like a trainer where you're taking on new people who are new to that sector or new to the
Okay.
job and showing them
Okay.
the ropes. So there are, I think, a variety of ways to express what it is that we do.
Okay. Okay. So I had to do a little bit of research regarding the average income for a literacy coach. I'm not sure if it was specific to district literacy coaches, but according to Google, it is about 63 to $65,000 a year in the US. So from your experience, do you think that that's accurate? What do you think about that range?
Could see that as
Okay.
being accurate because when I look at postings for positions, I usually see
Hmm.
that range. I
Okay.
think that the particular district that I'm working with is doing, maybe is on the higher end. And so
Okay.
I recognize that as I moved from one district to another, I think I was taking a pay cut. I was working at 67,500 and
Hmm.
then took a pay cut around 60,000 when I moved to my current district. But
Okay.
because there were so many I don't know, stipends and things added on or opportunities
Okay.
to write curriculum,
Yeah.
that I think it takes me more, like I might be more like at 72, and then with all those stipends, I'm probably more like at 80.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Perfect. And now, what are some current trends or challenges in this industry, and how do you see it changing in the next 5 to 10 years?
Current trends are that, after COVID, a lot of teachers left the profession. And so
Okay.
what that means for us as coaches is that there are, at least in Texas, there are a lot of people who are being hired who may not have the credentials of a traditional teacher.
Okay. I
So they
see.
may be, associate teachers in some realm where, or they could be part of Teach for America or something else where they're not yet certified, but they're sort of
Okay.
promising to be certified within a year or two.
Yeah.
And so they're still being paid as the same as certified teachers.
Mm.
And so I think you have to anticipate the amount of, I don't know if it's even, hmm, is it competition or resentment? Because you have people who went through traditional programs and might have
Hmm.
been teaching for 3 to 5 years, and they're getting paid the same as somebody who was a secretary last year, a dental hygienist last year,
Okay. Wow.
somebody who was coming from outside the profession and coming
Yeah.
in, and they may not have as much experience working with students. So when it comes to trends, hmm, I would say on the micro level, when it comes to managing your emotions and who you're coaching, I
Hmm.
coach instructional specialists. That's what my
Okay.
job is when I go to campuses. I coach them and they
Okay.
coach the teachers.
Okay.
So
I
I
see.
am there to help them manage coaching adults. And that can be very emotional, especially when
Hmm.
they're assuming, or they're fresh out of the classroom, they're assuming that everybody was a good teacher like they were. And a lot of times people like management will take, or principals might take people who were good teachers and say, oh, you would be a great instructional
Mm.
spell in specialist instructional specialist, or you would be a great coach, but those two things are not the same. And so working
Okay.
and doing well with teaching and then being able to build relationships and comfort and grow adults is two different lanes. So that trend of just taking people who are good teachers and putting them in this
Hmm.
position often causes people to leave the profession within the first year or so.
Wow.
Now, on
Okay.
a more macro level, this also means like, yes, we are giving support to teachers, and this is not a profession that is really old. It's pretty new. Like I don't know anybody who's retired from
Mm.
coaching, from literacy coaching, right? So this is
Okay.
something that has emerged within the last 20 years or so. Um,
Yeah.
but I see that there is a general trend to want to support teachers, to support educators, but I think that districts are often unsure about how to move forward in a way that values coaching and how
Mm.
and are able to even place a price on it, and what
Okay.
we do, and then to even like evaluate it and measure the impact that we have. So I think that
Yeah.
on the bleeding edge of coaching, that is where somebody could really come in and make sure to help solidify that a little bit better, and
Yeah.
define it.
Okay. And now going into just what your schedule looks like, what does your schedule look like, and what tasks do you spend the majority of your day doing?
As an elementary coach, my schedule might be from 7:25 to 3:25, right? So sort
Okay.
of school hours, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and during that time, I think when I first walk in, the thing I'm doing is just greeting everybody. Good morning, good morning, good
Mhm.
morning. And that kind of gets me started. I touch base with my instructional specialist that I'm coaching and seeing,
Okay.
okay, what's on your schedule for today? What did we say last week that is on your Google Calendar? Because that's the way I operate. Like, we're going to do everything by
Yeah.
Google. You're going to be very organized. And here are the ways in which to be organized and to travel with your organization system, because that's important as an educator.
Yeah.
So, they may have meetings, or I might have meetings with administrators to touch base about our goals and see, like, how are we doing with what we said
Okay.
at the outset of this quarter or this semester.
Okay.
Um, it may be helping that instructional specialist get ready for the weekly meetings they have with teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So those might be called PLCs, or, for professional learning communities, or CBPLs for content-based professional learning. So however
Mm-hmm.
people acron you'll use acronyms or
Yeah.
etymologizing. And then, like, we have a lot of jargon in ed and education. So it's whatever that meeting looks like, I'm helping the instructional specialist with that.
Okay.
um, what is your 9-week scope and sequence? Almost like a teacher does, like with their students. What do you want to accomplish over 9 weeks with your
Yeah.
teachers? How do you want this agenda to look for today's meeting with your second grade teachers, and then at, later in the afternoon with your fourth grade teachers? Then after that, what are your slides going to look like? Because I tend toward, we're going to present this professionally. So
Mm-hmm.
what are your slides looking like so that we can give a visual reference to your teachers?
Yeah.
What are some ways in which you're encouraging them? Are we doing, you know, um, badges, points, encouraging them by, verbally? What is it that we're doing to make sure that they show up on time, that we accomplish all of the tasks that you've laid out on your agenda, that we keep the energy high, because we know that it can really dip, especially around October, November, like the morale can really dip. So how are we keeping that high and helping them
Yeah.
share their achievements and celebrations? So moving throughout the day, it's a lot of encouraging of the person I'm working with, and showing and asking them how they plan to encourage others. So I
Mm-hmm.
will write sticky notes and saying, you were really amazing with this or that. If I sit in with them on a meeting with those teachers, I'm taking notes judiciously throughout. And
Okay.
afterwards, I'm speaking with that instructional specialist and saying, here are some ways in which you really rock this. Like, keep
Mm-hmm.
doing this, this, and this. Here's where I think that you might be able to tweak it. What did you think about
Okay.
when this happened? What did you notice about the learning? And so,
Yeah.
like, getting them to really reflect on their
Mm-hmm.
own practice and have them have those aha moments of, oh, if I start on time, then the teachers come on time. But if I start late, they just keep coming later and later. Like,
Yeah.
they have to recognize those bits. So
Yeah.
that's the majority of my day. And then at the end of the week, I will send a a report, essentially showing
Okay.
what the instructional specialist was able to accomplish this week and what are things that are still in progress. And I send that to administration. And they love that because it feels
Yeah.
really clear about what's happening in their literacy departments.
Yeah. And so, okay, so you do all of that during the school day, but do you see that you take any work home at all, or do you keep it between 7:30 and 3:30?
For the most part, I do not take work home. I think there are
Okay.
times, this is my preference. I prefer to work late rather than take work home. That's me,
Okay.
whether I
Yeah.
was a teacher or what have you. So, as a teacher, especially toward the end when I was getting burnt out, I was working like 12 or 13-hour days. There was always the
Wow.
custodians who were kicking me out around 7:38.
Wow.
Um, and now it depends on who I'm coaching. Sometimes the people
Mhm.
I'm coaching are really receptive and easy, or they want to stay there as long as I'm there. And I might be able to leave like right at 3:45, even though my day might end
Okay.
at 3:25. Sometimes I leave at 3:25, and that's fun. Um,
Okay.
but I usually tend to stay late. Sometimes I leave more like at 5 o'clock or so, especially when I'm going to model for that instructional specialist how to do a
Mm-hmm.
lesson. So I am planning for a third grade lesson on the human body, unit 3, lesson 8. And I've got to get my slides together and cut out little stuff for the students. And I'm going to be doing all of that to show them what they need to be doing for the teacher, right?
Wow.
And so that's where it does take a little more time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I will be honest about that. Even though I might be taking, or coaches might be taking, like 3 or 4 hours to prep these lessons, I will say that one critique of this is that we know teachers can't take that long to prep for one lesson. We're trying to make it the golden lesson, right? Like we're trying to
Yeah.
make it so that you can take notes on what I'm doing and that you can say, oh, I'd like to incorporate this into my practice. I love the way
Yeah.
you used the timer, the way you were praising the children. You took every response, but got them to dig a little deeper, or you got them up out of their seats. We're trying to do all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
so that might take more work than just going straight through from 7:25 to 3:25. I love that I don't take work home for the most part.
Yeah, I can imagine. So earlier you also mentioned about October, November, you have to kind of build up that momentum. Are there any busy seasons in this job? Is that considered the busy season? What can you say about that?
I think the busy season is starting next week, where
Okay,
right now
okay.
it's still summer. And coaches return about 1 week earlier than teachers do. And then teachers have
Okay.
2 weeks before the students return.
Hmm.
In that week, we are creating all of the professional development that they will need early on in the year. And we're thinking really deliberately, either back in May and the previous school year, or this, right before the school year starts, about do they need this right now, or can this wait until the second 9 weeks
Right.
or the third 9 weeks?
Hmm.
So that's the busiest time. And if we are trying to grow instructional specialists so that they can become the next coaches eventually, then we're doing training of the trainers
Okay.
and after we create a professional development session on effective questioning, let's say, now we're getting that instructional specialist to understand and go through all of the slides and understand what it is that this session is trying to accomplish, so that we can present it to teachers the following week as
Okay.
co-presenters.
Okay.
So this is the busy season, like getting ready for
Yeah.
students, um, is our grand opening every year. So that is definitely a busy season. The second busy season, once you've gotten students in, yes, there's a dip in October or so because you spent maybe about 7 or 8 weeks with your students, and now you know the challenges. Now
Hmm.
all your high hopes, and all the cute things that you made in your room to look like a Pinterest teacher have been maybe half torn down, or
That's
it fell
true.
off the wall and it was impractical, or nobody paid attention to it because you really had to do all these other things that your campus wanted you to
Yeah.
do. And so you never got to the cool little station and cool down spot that you made. Um, so yes, that's a really tough time for teachers, but the busyness kicks back up when it's almost time for state testing.
Okay.
So after we come back from winter break, usually about 2 weeks off in December for the traditional school,
Hmm.
there's a noticeable ramping up of we've got to get kids ready for testing
Yeah.
in March and April. And that feels like another flurry of activity along with
Hmm.
more anxiety and pressure. And I think that's also where teachers really feel like I don't feel supported anymore, because
Yeah.
now all of this that my students do on their performance is on me.
Yeah. It sounds like the whole year is busy for you guys.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's why
Yeah.
it's also like when people say, oh, you get time off in the summer. I mean,
Yeah.
sort of, but it's also like now I'm making all my doctor's appointments and like getting my car fixed and doing all the things that I couldn't do when people were really more depending on me every day.
Yeah. Okay, so earlier we talked about the path that you took to become a district literacy coach, but what are some certain degrees or certifications that are common to get this type of job?
It is typical for a person to have their teaching degree
Okay,
or teaching certificate in the area in which they are going to be coaching.
okay.
Um, Funny enough, there's not really, at least in the district that I've been working in and in the districts that I've been working in as a teacher, what have you, I've never seen a requirement for those who are coaching to have coaching certificates,
Okay.
go through coaching classes and have certain certifications. So
Yeah,
right now, I would say that's probably not something that is necessary because, again, it's such a new profession that we got to work through some of our mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes are choosing people who may not necessarily fit the role and then figuring out,
right.
oh, we got to train them. Oh, they're sad. We have to like build them up. Oh, they're
Yeah.
inexperienced. We have to make sure to support them all along the way, not just one training at the beginning of the year. But
Hmm.
that takes a lot of trial and error. And
Okay.
while I feel that my district is doing a great job of refining what those systems are, I have also seen over the last 4 years that I've been with them that when I stepped in with my team and was like, okay, so what coaching models are you using? And they were like, models?
Mm.
We just like support teachers and like do lessons for them and stuff. And then they watch it and they do it. And so I was like, are you using the grow model or are you using, like who are you following? Are like the big names in coaching? And that
Yeah.
was not really a thing. So
Okay.
over time of the following year, I might see a system that I implemented for how to create a weekly schedule for an instructional specialist. Okay, now that's being used the following year. Or
Okay.
how to set a SMART goal and then um, create all the different action steps that it might take to keep everybody accountable to reach that goal. Okay, that gets done 2 years from now. So I still feel like while there was a lot of innovation going on in the first couple of
Hmm.
years that I stepped in, especially right after COVID, um, I think that there's more refinement that's happening now rather than initiatives.
Mm.
So
Okay.
I, it can go it can go either way. I think there are definitely ways to make this work for you and not have to get a whole lot of certificates. But I
Hmm.
think that if you want to help your client, you're going to have to do some reading. You're going to have
Yeah.
to pick up books by, Elena Aguilar about transformational coaching or Jim Knight about instructional coaching in order to figure
Okay.
out like, oh, when I approach a meeting, I should prepare for it by doing like looking at the goal, then looking at what's coming up next. What does my client feel scared about, or what do they feel proud about? And let me go in there and ask them questions based on those things. And
Yeah.
without that, your meetings can kind of meander all over the place, and the person
Hmm.
might not feel like the time was well used. And
Okay.
maybe they then don't want to spend as much time around you as a coach. And so you're no longer building their capacity. So you
Okay.
will have to do I think, some work on your own or try to initiate things in your district to get it so that coaches are still we're being coached.
Yeah. Okay. And so since certifications are not really a requirement, what do you think are some just natural strengths or talents that someone has to have in order to be a good literacy coach? What should these districts be looking for in people?
I think the districts not only should be looking for somebody who is strong in literacy because that is a given, and I think that's why they pull in people who are
Hmm.
teachers so often. Um, that's great. And when you're moving from one grade band to another, that can be really important because people
Hmm.
who are, kindergarten, first grade, second grade teachers, if that's where the majority of their experience has been in the foundational skills of reading, then they might really struggle with, older students who already have those skills and they should be working on comprehension or fluency and being able to read really smoothly and accurately. And then vice versa. Those who are comfortable with those upper grades might not really know, like, how do I actually teach a person to read?
Yeah.
So I think those parts are important to note when looking for a strong candidate. Where's their
Yeah.
area of strength? I think that but given that, I think that somebody could even come into this profession being a decent teacher. You don't have to be an excellent teacher. Be
Okay.
decent. Make sure that your
Okay.
kids were growing, that they were able to, like, if you're a third grade teacher, you got them from like being baby third graders to being ready for fourth grade. Like, you don't have to be
Yeah.
teacher of the year. What's more important is that you understand how to work with people, because I think that's the part that it will hold you back the most. When I see coaches or instructional specialists who are like, oh, I can't stand people, are like, how come the teachers do this all the time? If you don't understand the way people's minds work, then you might think they should already know everything and
Mm.
you're not
Okay.
like clear on how to break things down for them the way you broke them down for your first graders. Like, you have to take things in steps or roll out processes in chunks rather than saying, everybody, we're doing all new things tomorrow. Change your calendars, change how you submit your lesson plans, and make sure that it's all of this is due by noon, right? Like, you can't really do that to people. And so knowing that when you are changing things up too much for people, for their brains to like keep up with, or
Hmm.
for them to be happy and feel like they are confident rather than always kept off kilter, is going to be the most important. So being
Okay.
a really strong coach and being okay in reading and reading instruction, I think winds up being,
Okay.
your bread and butter. If you have a background in psychology, that will be a huge benefit. I've found that my
Okay.
psychology degree um, has helped me more every day as both a teacher and a coach, even more than my educational degree.
Wow. Okay. And you mentioned just taking steps and being organized, using calendars. What are some other tools besides Google Calendar that you mentioned earlier, that you use a lot as part of your job?
So a lot of the tools that I use, I've created because there may
Okay.
not be something there.
Okay.
Um, so for instance, I'm creating a tool right now that is helping to understand, like, what are the symptoms you see when you first step on a campus, and what does that mean? Like, where are the areas of coaching that would help you
Mm.
shore up or build up those areas? So
Wow.
if you see, for instance, um, teachers go to their weekly meetings and they get information, but then when they go into the classroom, they're not delivering the lesson the way we talked about in the meeting. So what does that mean? That means that perhaps that the objective of the meeting wasn't very clear. They didn't get a chance to rehearse in real time what it should look like in front of students and get feedback from their
Hmm.
peers. Here's what was effective. Here's where, next time you could try this. Um, Maybe the instructional specialist didn't go into the classroom, like say, hey, we are rehearsing, unit 3, lesson 4, and I'm going to be in your classroom on the day that you're teaching it. When is that? Okay. March 3rd, I'll be there. And then taking notes and giving feedback to that person based exactly on what they said they would do in their rehearsal. So having all of those things be aligned to me is like, I don't know if there's another tool for it, but I see that looking at a unit of study, there are certain lessons that are going to sort of be lifted out of that unit
Okay.
that are can't miss, don't mess this one up kind of lessons, right?
Yeah.
And those high leverage lessons are the ones where we should be paying the most attention to internalizing. Those are the ones
Okay.
that teachers need to rehearse and get feedback on. Those are the ones that teachers need to receive, need to take their students' work from that lesson and analyze it together in the next meeting. And those are
Okay.
protocols that my district has: a student work analysis protocol, a lesson internalization protocol, a unit unpacking protocol, data
Okay.
analysis protocol. So there's about 4 or 5 protocols where
Wow.
here's what you're supposed to do, but you can get lost as a coach if you're not doing all those things. And especially if you step onto a campus and you notice, like you have to notice that data analysis isn't happening, that the IS is scared to hold teachers accountable for gathering their students' lessons at the end
Mm,
and being willing to put them in piles of not yet, approaches, meets, and masters the standard, because that
yeah.
is really personal and it's really vulnerable. And it's easy for teachers to get defensive about their students and,
Yeah.
so and so means well, he was really trying. I respect that, Miss Ramirez, but also, does it match the rubric that we
Yeah.
created a week ago before, you had, Joel or Maria do whatever they're doing? So
Mm,
those, I think, there's a lot of tools that are in place. Like, there's a basic amount of tools that are in place, I should say. And then from there, what sort of separates you out in the league is like what other tools you implement that are specific and tailored to the campus needs.
okay. Perfect. And so now we want to give our listeners a little bit of advice. So if someone wants to make a pivot from another career into this one, but they don't necessarily want to go back to school or they might not have an educational background, what do you think is the best way for them to start getting their foot in the door?
As I mentioned before, having a coaching and training background is important,
Mhm.
but I think that I'm a little bit of a revolutionary when it comes to, you could have excellent coaches who are okay at literacy do this work, right? I think for the most part, school districts are really committed to seeing teachers do this work. And
Okay.
so I think that the main pieces that I've seen work really well for anybody who's moving from the classroom to being out of the classroom, like going from teacher to instructional specialist to coach, I've
Mhm.
seen that they need to be coachable. If
Okay.
they are the person or they are the teacher who's like, why we gotta do this? If they're the ones who are always doing that, like, and that's common in teaching. We complain, but we still do it. But if they are the ones who are like, come in, coach me, help me, and then whatever their coach gives them as advice, they're like, oh, I see the connection. I see why that would be effective for my students. Don't worry, it ain't gonna be like this tomorrow. Come back and see me. Come back and see me. I promise. If they're that kind of person, they're going to
Yeah.
be a great coach, because
Yeah.
the people who are more resistant as teachers struggle with those who are also resistant to them. And they're like,
Okay.
why aren't you just doing the thing that I told you? And I sometimes have to remind them, because I've seen them move, is, well, how open were you? And let's talk about what that looked like, and where were the things that might have
Yeah.
been some of your obstacles. Maybe we can try that with Miss So and so, and or Mr. So and so, and see if we can come from that angle. But for the
Mhm.
most part, it remains a challenge for
Okay.
them. And I think that the majority of people who I've seen move out of the profession quickly, at least as instructional specialists, are those who have been resistant to coaching, either as a
Okay.
teacher or as an instructional specialist. When it comes to
Okay.
the coaches, for the most part, they stay. They stay where they're at. If they leave to be administrators,
Mhm.
um, or they leave. I guess I've seen 1 or 2 go back to the classroom, especially when
Okay.
there's incentive pay, um, for their students to do well. I mean, hey,
Mhm.
if you can earn an extra $30,000 by going to a struggling school, and
Yeah.
you already know how to teach really well, and so you're just, you're going back into the classroom and you
Of
want to take
course.
on the
Yeah.
grading and the behavior and the parent stuff and all of that. then get your money, you know.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they kind of stay where they're at. Those coaches stay in my
Okay.
district.
Okay. And earlier you mentioned, I think it was two books that you recommended, but what are some other books or resources, maybe even programs that you would recommend for people that are interested in this job?
I would definitely recommend books by Elena Aguilar, The Art of Coaching. Um,
Hmm.
there's another one that's it's like Coaching for Equity, I believe.
Okay.
Um, so those have been really instrumental to me in my learning process because it helps me to not try to direct where people are going so much
Okay.
and instead
I see.
listen to where they are coming from and ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And for that, sometimes it takes time. You may have to sit through somebody sharing how much they dislike their job or dislike teachers or students. And then, like, after you've given them that space to be like, what do you hear yourself saying right now? It's like almost
Mhm.
like you're not in the realm of a therapist, but you are like, because you're off limits from going into like their childhood stuff or what have you.
Mm,
But you are definitely somebody who is listening to venting, seeing a lot of people cry.
okay.
You've got to be comfortable with that. I know it is
Yeah.
uncomfortable each time, but I've learned to like hand a tissue and be like, okay, boo, go, here you go. Here you go. Let's
Yeah.
breathe together. What do you feel is the most effective way to spend our time in the next 10 minutes before you have to go do lunch? So I think you have to be able to receive what people are feeling. And as a teacher, as a coach, that can always be tough because as you're using these resources and you're taking on people's emotions and sometimes their drama, and that teacher wouldn't even say good morning to me now that I've observed her, and who does she think she is? You got to take on all of that, right? If somebody
Yeah.
hearing all this with you. And I think it's important to also take steps for your own self-care and your own therapy because it can be a lot. And you don't necessarily want to like take all that on and then go home to your family and be like, I've listened to else all day. I need y'all to listen to me. Listen to not one more thing, right? I don't want to know how your day was, you're exhausted. What's for dinner? Like,
You're right.
so if you want to be able to balance some of those things, then you will also likely need resources that you can work through. If you're a journalist, like go ahead and journal and get it all out. If you're a person who sits in your car for 30 minutes listening to podcasts in the garage, like do that. Um, if you go for walks every morning with your dog, and I'm suggesting all the things I do, because if it's really about like always take a salad to work, that's me. Because I'm like, I need to eat healthfully and have lots of energy, for this kind of work. If it's all of those things, then do the things that will help you remain healthy. And so I know those
Yeah.
aren't the most, academic kind of resources or professional resources, but I don't know what else to say, but girl, if you know you're gonna take on all that, be ready, be ready.
Okay. Okay. So that was some great advice, but now I want to know if you could talk to your younger self when you were just starting out in this area, what advice would you give her?
Ooh, young Crystal, you know, I'm not I'm not averse to some of the people who are in this profession saying, don't do teaching. Because there's so much about like it's how do I say this? I don't really feel that way. I still know how passionate I was and how
Mhm.
much I wanted to change the world and transform society through education. So it wouldn't have really been appropriate to turn me away from this. I would say, just know you are a public servant. And when it comes to public service, whether you are a police officer, firefighter, a politician, you are going to see the ugly underside of society. You're going to
Mhm.
see, students in fifth grade who are reading at a first grade level.
Wow.
You're going to be with the
Yeah.
children whose clothes aren't clean and they smell the way they smell because they haven't been cleansed in a while.
Yeah.
You're going to see teachers yelling at children. You're going to see parents come in and mistreating their children. You're going to see a lot of things that are going to really like strike you hard and are going to
Yeah.
hurt. You're also going to see fourth graders developing their sense of humor and trying to graduate almost from like bodily function jokes to
Yeah.
like puns because words can have more than one meaning,
Right.
um and you're teaching them how like about multiple meaning words as their literacy teacher, right? You're
Mhm.
going to see people who make inroads in relationships with others that they thought they were ready to, throw in the towel, or they were ready to just dislike this person for the whole school year, and wound up finding out that person's background, asking them the right questions, and now they come back and they're all excited to you, almost like the way students do, but that's just the way humans are. They just come
Mhm.
to you and they want to share this exciting moment because you're their coach. And they're like, she's talking to me now. And he was so open when I told him this. And have you noticed he's turning in all his lesson plans on time? Oh my gosh. And the kids are doing so well. I saw one of them, like they have been at a second grade reading level and now they're up to third grade. And if he just keeps working with them, that you see the miracles too.
Yeah.
So I would tell that person, I would tell young Crystal, if you want to choose a different minor, not, I mean, dance was lovely. That was my minor, but go ahead and keep going with astronomy. Like, also choose something. Like, I know that one class was maybe a little boring, having to calculate the magnitude of stars over and over and over in lab. But if you can get through like the more basic parts, you are also going to get to the things that you've loved since you were 8
Yeah.
and into being an astronomer for. So you can be a Neil deGrasse Tyson, you can be both. You can be the teacher and the astrophysicist.
Yeah.
So I might tell myself that. And you can also like, have a more lucrative career where you're not like waiting until the summer to like fix your car, and working summer school to do it.
Yeah.
So I would say like that part. I would
Okay.
probably tell her to just keep on doing the thing of which you are most passionate about and working and loving on people, as well as
Yeah.
carving out a path that is going to be valued, valued.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, amazing. All right. Well, Crystal, thank you so much again for joining me on today's episode. It was truly a pleasure to have you and just to listen about everything that has to do with your whole experience, your whole path. It was very nice to hear. So thank you so much again for being here.
It was my pleasure.
You just got one episode closer to learning about the world of jobs out there. To explore the rest of our career categories and find your best fit, go to jobdictionary.com to sign up for the beta users waitlist. Then subscribe here to find the next episodes coming out this week. And as always, drop us a comment, review, or message to let us know how we could better attune our episodes to your specific needs. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, Threads, Pinterest, and wherever else you're on socials to go get our short, snappy preview reels that expose you to new job options every day. Because here at Job Dictionary, we believe your big aha moment can be just one scroll away. Go check it out and get out there. Cheers!